In life, when the soul grows weary from knocking on doors that never seem to open, yet heaven often waits for one simple act before releasing what has already been prepared: gratitude. The man who thanks God before the miracle arrives speaks a language deeper than fear, deeper than doubt, deeper even than longing itself. For gratitude is not merely good manners before God, it is evidence of trust. And when trust rises from the human heart, unseen gates begin to move upon their ancient hinges. Tonight, you are not merely asking for favor and breakthrough, you are learning how to stand before God with the posture that invites both. Most people thank God after the answer arrives, after the burden lifts, after the miracle becomes visible enough to touch. But there is a rarer kind of soul, a deeper kind of believer, who whispers gratitude while the sky is still dark. This person stands before unopened doors and says, "Lord, I thank you," not because circumstances are pleasant, but because faith has already seen what the eyes cannot yet confirm. Such gratitude confuses the fearful mind because the world has trained humanity to celebrate only visible victories. Heaven, however, has always responded to something greater than visible evidence. God listens closely to the heart that thanks him before the harvest appears. A thankful spirit in seasons of uncertainty is not weakness, it is one of the strongest acts a human being can perform. Anyone can rejoice when the prayer has already been answered. Anyone can sing when the prison doors are already open. But the soul that praises while chains still remain carries within it a strange and holy confidence. It declares that God's character is trustworthy even when life feels unfinished. That kind of faith moves beyond transaction. It no longer says, "I will love you if you bless me." Instead it says, "I trust you because you are good, even before I understand what you are doing." Many people unknowingly postpone their peace because they have chained gratitude to outcomes. They tell themselves they will finally rest when the money arrives, when the relationship heals, when the opportunity appears, when the pain disappears. Yet peace built upon changing circumstances is fragile by nature. C.S. Lewis often understood that the human heart was made for something eternal, not temporary. The deepest stability does not come from observing every earthly answer. It comes from knowing the one who stands beyond every storm. Gratitude reconnects the restless soul to that eternal reality. There is also something profoundly transformative about thanking God before the breakthrough. Gratitude changes the person who offers it. Fear begins to lose its authority. Anxiety loosens its grip upon the imagination. Complaining slowly fades because the heart can no longer stare only at what is missing. A grateful soul begins noticing mercies that bitterness could never see. The breath in the lungs becomes sacred. The quiet morning becomes evidence of grace. Even survival itself begins to feel like proof that God has not abandoned his children. Some people think faith means denying pain, but true faith does not pretend suffering is absent. Rather, it looks directly at suffering while still refusing to surrender hope. The thankful believer may still carry tears in their eyes, but those tears are no longer empty of meaning. They become prayers themselves. Gratitude in hardship is not the refusal to acknowledge difficulty, it is the refusal to believe difficulty has the final word. There are doors in life that human effort alone cannot open. Influence cannot force them open. Intelligence cannot unlock them. Connections cannot guarantee them. Certain doors move only when God breathes upon them. Yet before many of those doors swing wide, God first shapes the heart standing before them. A person consumed by entitlement would destroy the very blessing they demand. But gratitude prepares the soul to carry favor without pride. It teaches humility before increase arrives. The mystery is that many breakthroughs begin invisibly long before they become visible outwardly. While you are thanking God in secret, unseen things may already be shifting. Hearts may already be softening. Opportunities may already be forming. Protection may already be surrounding you in ways your eyes cannot yet perceive. Heaven often works quietly before it works publicly, and the grateful heart learns to trust God even in silence. Believing that divine activity does not cease merely because human senses cannot detect it, it is often only with the passing of years that a person discovers how many sorrows were actually mercies in disguise. What once appeared to be rejection slowly reveals itself as protection. What felt like abandonment becomes evidence that God refused to let the soul enter a place that would have wounded it beyond measure. Yet in the moment of waiting, the human heart rarely interprets closed doors this way. We are creatures who naturally mourn what we cannot have. We stare at the locked entrance and imagine that all happiness exists on the other side of it. But God, who sees not only beginnings but endings also, often withholds what the impatient soul would eagerly destroy itself pursuing. There are prayers that seem unanswered only because heaven is wiser than human desire. A person begs for an opportunity, unaware that the opportunity carries hidden ruin. Another plea for a relationship, while God sees the quiet suffering waiting years ahead within it. Sometimes the very thing we call disappointment is the hand of divine mercy pulling us back from unseen destruction. Yet because pain speaks loudly in the immediate moment, we mistake God's silence for cruelty. C.S. Lewis understood deeply that human beings are limited not only in strength, but in vision. We see fragments while God sees the whole tapestry. A child may resent the parent who refuses permission, never understanding the danger hidden beneath the request. In much the same way, many people accuse heaven of neglect when, in truth, they are being guarded. Closed doors do not always mean God is absent. Quite often they are proof He is near enough to intervene. The difficulty is that pride makes people believe they know exactly what should happen and exactly when it should happen. Modern life feeds this illusion constantly. Humanity worships control. It teaches that every delay is failure, every obstacle an insult, every unanswered desire a sign that something has gone wrong. But the spiritual life moves according to a different rhythm altogether. God is not hurried by human panic. He does not tremble because a timetable has changed. He understands that timing can save a soul as much as direction can. Many wounds in life are not caused by closed doors, but by forcing open doors that God never intended to open. There are people who entered careers that slowly emptied them of joy because they could not bear waiting for the right path. Others chained themselves to relationships born from loneliness rather than wisdom. Some gained temporary success only to discover they had sacrificed peace, character, and spirit. Health in exchange for applause. The tragedy is not merely suffering, it is suffering that could have been avoided had patience been allowed to mature. Yet the human soul resists waiting because waiting exposes how little control we truly possess. When every plan collapses, when every attempt fails, we are confronted with our dependence upon God. And dependence is uncomfortable for the ego. It prefers certainty, movement, and visible progress. But there are sacred lessons learned only in halted seasons. Sometimes God closes outward doors so the inward life may finally awaken. There is also mercy in realizing that not every closed door is permanent. Some doors are shut only for a season because the person standing before them is not yet prepared to carry what lies beyond. A blessing given too early may become a burden instead of a gift. God's delays are often forms of preparation disguised as denial. While people complain about being stuck, heaven may be strengthening wisdom, deepening character, and removing hidden weaknesses that would later destroy the very breakthrough being requested. The soul begins to mature when it stops interpreting every disappointment as abandonment. Faith grows quieter then steadier. It no longer collapses each time life changes direction unexpectedly. Instead, it begins asking different questions. Not merely, why is this happening to me? But what might God be protecting me from? Such questions soften bitterness. They allow trust to survive even in confusion. And perhaps one of the greatest acts of spiritual courage is to stand before a closed door without resentment. To believe that God remains good even when life feels restricted. To understand that divine love is not proven only through gifts granted, but sometimes through gifts withheld. For there are roads that seem beautiful at first glance but end in emptiness. And there are detours that feel painful at first, yet quietly lead the soul toward peace. It could never have discovered otherwise. There are people who spend their entire lives waiting for extraordinary moments, while quietly overlooking the sacredness hidden within ordinary days. They believe God is found only in dramatic miracles, in sudden breakthroughs, in unmistakable signs from heaven. Yet many of the holiest transformations begin in places so simple that pride almost refuses to notice them. Gratitude has the strange power of opening the eyes to what was already present. What once seemed ordinary begins to glow with meaning. The soul awakens to the realization that life itself has always been layered with quiet mercies. A person who lacks gratitude moves through the world half asleep. They consume blessings without wonder. They survive countless dangers without reflection. They wake each morning without considering the astonishing fragility of breath itself. But the thankful heart begins seeing differently. A conversation arrives at the exact moment despair was growing unbearable. A small opportunity appears after weeks of uncertainty. Strength is somehow present even after nights of exhaustion and grief. These moments may appear insignificant to the hurried mind, yet gratitude recognizes them as fingerprints of divine care. C.S. Lewis often wrote as though heaven and earth were far more intertwined than most people realize. The modern world trains individuals to believe that meaning exists only in grand achievements and visible success. Yet the spiritual life frequently unfolds through unnoticed moments. A quiet prayer whispered alone in the dark may shape eternity more than applause from thousands. A simple act of kindness may redirect a wounded soul standing at the edge of hopelessness. Gratitude teaches the heart to stop dismissing small things, because God Himself often chooses humble vessels through which to work. There is something tragic about becoming so consumed by future desires that the present moment loses all beauty. Many people postpone joy endlessly. They tell themselves they will finally appreciate life once the promotion comes, once the relationship improves, once the finances stabilize, once every unanswered question disappears. Yet life passes while they are waiting for perfection. Gratitude interrupts this dangerous habit. It anchors the soul in the present instead of imprisoning it within endless dissatisfaction. This does not mean pretending pain does not exist. Some days carry genuine sorrow. Some seasons are marked by loneliness, disappointment, or uncertainty so deep that even simple tasks feel heavy. But gratitude changes the atmosphere within suffering. It prevents darkness from becoming the only thing the soul can see. Even in grief, there may still be strength to endure another day. Even in confusion, there may still be you are done arriving quietly one step at a time. Gratitude does not erase hardship, it reveals that hardship is not the whole story. And strangely enough, ordinary moments often become the very places where divine appointments occur. A delayed plan redirects someone toward the exact conversation they needed. An unexpected interruption introduces a connection that alters the course of life. What appears accidental to human eyes may actually carry hidden purpose. But only the attentive heart notices such things. Bitterness blinds people to wonder. Gratitude sharpens spiritual vision. Many souls are exhausted not because God has abandoned them, but because they have trained themselves to overlook His presence unless it arrives dramatically. They seek thunder while ignoring whispers. They demand spectacles while overlooking daily provision. Yet some of the greatest proofs of divine faithfulness are woven quietly into routine existence. The strength to continue after heartbreak, the peace that appears unexpectedly during prayer, the endurance to survive what once seemed impossible. These are not small things. There is also a profound humility born from gratitude. A thankful person stops, behaving as though life is owed to them. They begin understanding that every good thing carries the scent of grace. The smallest joys become treasures instead of entitlements. A peaceful evening, a word of encouragement, a moment of rest, a door slightly opening after years of struggle all begin to feel sacred. And perhaps that is part of God's intention all along. Not merely to give humanity blessings, but to awaken humanity to the holiness hidden within life itself. For the ungrateful soul remains perpetually restless, always chasing the next miracle while remaining blind to the quiet evidence of divine love already surrounding them every single day. There are moments when a person prays desperately for a new door to open, yet never considers whether their own heart is prepared for what lies beyond it. Human beings often assume that blessing alone is enough, that opportunity by itself guarantees peace. But God is not merely concerned with giving people new places to stand, He is concerned with who they become when they arrive there. For a door opened too soon can destroy a soul just as surely as a door permanently closed. Many people desire elevation without transformation. They will ask for influence while still ruled by insecurity. They seek abundance while remaining unable to steward small responsibilities faithfully. They crave recognition while secretly depending upon the approval of others to feel worthy. Yet if God were to release certain blessings before the inner life matured, the very gift being requested could become a source of ruin. Success amplifies whatever already exists within the heart. If pride lives there, pride grows louder. If emptiness lives there, emptiness becomes harder to escape. This is why heaven often works upon the soul before it changes the circumstance. C.S. Lewis understood that God's greatest concern is not comfort alone but redemption. Human beings tend to focus upon immediate relief, immediate progress, immediate answers. But God looks deeper. He sees the eternal shape of a person's character. Sometimes what feels like delay is actually divine craftsmanship. The waiting season is not meaningless emptiness. It is preparation happening beneath the surface. There are lessons learned only in hidden places. Patience cannot grow where everything arrives instantly. Humility rarely develops in uninterrupted success. Compassion emerges from personal suffering. Dependence upon God becomes real when human strength finally proves insufficient. Many people wish to skip these uncomfortable processes, yet they are often the very things that prepare the soul to carry greater responsibility without collapsing beneath it. A person unprepared internally may mishandle externally what they once begged heaven to receive. Relationships fail not only because of circumstance but because wounded hearts enter them seeking salvation from another human being. Opportunities are squandered because character was never strengthened enough to sustain them. Even spiritual blessings can become distorted when the soul still longs more for personal glory than for God Himself. The tragedy is that impatience convinces people that movement is always progress. In reality, some movement is merely escape. A restless soul may chase new environments believing they will cure inner emptiness, only to discover the same fears traveling faithfully beside them. But God's work is often slower because it aims deeper. He does not merely decorate the exterior life while leaving the interior untouched. There is also mercy in the seasons where no thing appears to change outwardly. While a person complains that doors remain closed, invisible work may be occurring within them. Destructive habits may be weakening. Wisdom may be quietly forming through disappointment. Pride may be softening through failure. Faith may be deepening through uncertainty. These hidden transformations rarely feel dramatic while they are happening, yet later they become the very foundation upon which lasting breakthrough stands. The soul becomes dangerous in a holy sense when it no longer needs external validation to remain steady, when peace is no longer dependent upon constant success, when identity is rooted not in applause but in God's presence. Such a person can walk through open doors without becoming intoxicated by them. Blessings no longer become idols because the heart has already learned surrender. And perhaps this is why some prayers seem delayed far longer than expected. Not because God delights in withholding goodness, but because He sees the future weight attached to the answer. A larger assignment requires broader shoulders. Greater influence demands deeper humility. New doors often require a new version of the person walking through them. The frightening truth is that many people ask God to change their circumstances while resisting every process designed to change themselves. Yet breakthrough is not merely about entering a new season externally. It is about becoming someone capable of surviving that season faithfully. And so heaven sometimes keeps the door closed a little longer, not to punish the soul standing before it, but to prepare that soul so completely that when the door finally opens, they can walk through it without losing themselves on the other side. Most people expect favor to arrive like thunder. They imagine it will announce itself loudly, all at once, in ways impossible to ignore. They wait for dramatic signs, public recognition, immediate transformation. Yet divine favor often enters a life quietly, almost unnoticed at first. It begins in small shifts, subtle changes, moments that seem ordinary to everyone except the soul paying close attention. Heaven rarely feels the need to perform for human applause. God's greatest works often begin in silence long before they become visible to the world. A person may think nothing is changing while favor is already moving beneath the surface of their life. A conversation unexpectedly opens a future opportunity. A delay quietly prevents disaster. Strength appears during a season that should have destroyed them emotionally. Peace enters the heart before circumstances improve externally. These are not accidents. But because humanity is obsessed with spectacle, many fail to recognize favor unless it arrives wrapped in immediate success. C.S. Lewis often carried the understanding that spiritual realities are deeper and more enduring than visible appearances. The modern world measures blessing almost entirely through outward evidence: money, influence, status, recognition. Yet some of God's greatest favors cannot be photographed or displayed publicly. The ability to endure suffering without becoming bitter is favor. The preservation of hope after disappointment is favor. Wisdom gained through hardship is favor. Protection from paths that would have ruined the soul is favor, even if the protected person initially experiences only frustration. There are seasons where favor looks strangely unimpressive from the outside. A person survives what should have crushed them. Another loses something they desperately wanted, only later realizing it would have destroyed their peace. Someone receives strength to continue through grief one day at a time. Heaven's kindness often appears first not as abundance but as preservation. The difficulty is that impatience blinds people to gradual miracles. Humanity wants immediate evidence. We crave visible confirmation that life is improving. Yet God frequently works like the sunrise, slowly, steadily, almost imperceptibly at first. No single moment announces the arrival of dawn, yet eventually darkness gives way to light. Divine favor moves similarly. It unfolds in layers. There is also wisdom in the quietness of favor. Some blessings develop best away from public attention. A seed buried beneath the soil appears unimpressive until the day growth finally breaks through the surface. But had the seed remained exposed too early, it may never have survived at all. In much the same way, God sometimes conceals his work in a person's life until the proper season arrives. Many souls mistakenly believe heaven has forgotten them because they compare their private process to another person's public outcome. They see someone else's visible success while remaining unaware of the unseen shaping happening within their own story. But comparison is a cruel interpreter of God's timing. Favor does not unfold identically for every life. Some blessings arrive quickly, others mature slowly because they carry greater depth and responsibility. The heart must also learn not to despise small beginnings. A single opportunity may appear insignificant yet become the doorway to an entirely different future. A quiet season of spiritual growth may prepare someone for influence they cannot yet imagine. The problem is that pride often overlooks beginnings that seem too humble. Yet throughout history, God has repeatedly chosen small things through which to reveal greater purposes. There is something profoundly comforting in understanding that divine favor does not always depend upon human recognition. A person may feel unseen by the world while still being deeply guided by heaven. Public applause is not proof of blessing, just as obscurity is not proof of abandonment. Some of the most favored seasons of life are hidden ones, where God builds strength, clarity, and character away from distraction. And perhaps that is why many breakthroughs seem sudden to observers even though they were years in the making. People witness the visible moment and call it overnight success, never realizing how long favor had already been working quietly behind the scenes. The open door becomes public only after the hidden preparation is complete. What appears instant externally was often developing invisibly all along, through silent prayers, private endurance, unseen protection, and countless moments where God was guiding a soul long before anyone else could recognize it. There is a particular kind of suffering that comes not from pain itself, but from waiting without understanding. The human heart can endure many hardships if it knows when they will end, but uncertainty exhausts the soul in quieter ways. Days begin to blur together. Prayers seem to rise into silence. Hope grows fragile from constant disappointment. And in such seasons, many people slowly begin to believe that delay itself is evidence of abandonment. Yet the soul that continues trusting God while waiting discovers a strength that hurried people never learn. Waiting exposes what truly governs the heart. When life moves quickly and desires are fulfilled easily, faith appears simple. But when heaven remains silent for long, even than expected, deeper realities emerge. Fear begins whispering that nothing will ever change. Doubt asks whether God was listening at all. Bitterness tempts the soul to grow cold and cynical. The waiting season becomes a kind of wilderness where hidden weaknesses surface one by one. C.S. Lewis understood that suffering often strips away illusions people did not even realize they were carrying. Human beings naturally build fragile expectations around how life should unfold. We secretly assume goodness means comfort, progress, and immediate answers. Yet reality repeatedly shatters these assumptions. The soul then faces a choice. Either surrender entirely to despair or allow hardship to deepen its dependence upon God. Many people break during delay because they spend the entire season fighting reality instead of learning how to walk faithfully through it. They demand explanations for every unanswered prayer. They obsess over timelines heaven never promised. And because their peace depends entirely upon circumstances changing quickly, Anxiety becomes their constant companion. But the trusting soul slowly learns another way to live. It discovers that peace can survive even before our solution arrives. This does not happen instantly. Trust is rarely born from ease. It is formed gradually through repeated moments of surrender, through choosing prayer when discouragement feels easier, through continuing forward even while carrying unanswered questions, through refusing to let darkness define the entirety of existence. The trusting soul may still experience grief, confusion, and weariness, but those emotions no longer possess absolute authority. There is something profoundly transformative about remaining soft-hearted during prolonged waiting. Hardship often tempts people toward emotional numbness. They stop expecting goodness because disappointment feels safer than hope. Yet numbness is not healing, it is merely self-protection disguised as strength. The soul that continues trusting God resists this temptation. It refuses to become entirely cynical even after repeated delays. And strangely enough, waiting often reveals how much of human identity was attached to control. People imagine they are strong because they can organize, plan, and manage outcomes. But certain seasons remove those illusions completely. No amount of effort can force open the right door before, or its time. No amount of worrying can accelerate divine timing. The soul gradually learns humility through this realization. It begins understanding that life is not sustained merely by human striving. There are also blessings hidden within waiting that become visible only afterward. Compassion deepens in those who have suffered uncertainty themselves. Patience grows where immediate gratification once ruled. Prayer becomes more sincere because superficial faith can no longer survive untouched. Many people who later carry great wisdom first passed through seasons where they felt forgotten. The tragedy is that some abandon hope moments before breakthrough quietly begins forming. They interpret silence as absence when God may still be working invisibly beyond their understanding. Human vision is painfully limited. We judge entire futures based upon temporary moments. But delay is not always denial. Sometimes it is preparation. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is simply the mysterious pace at which eternal purposes unfold within temporary lives. A trusting soul eventually realizes that God's faithfulness cannot be measured solely by speed. Divine love is not proven only thus, rough immediate rescue. Sometimes it is revealed through the strength to endure what should have destroyed you, through peace appearing unexpectedly in the middle of confusion, through quiet perseverance rising again each morning despite exhaustion. And perhaps one of the greatest spiritual victories is not receiving everything quickly, but remaining faithful while waiting longer than expected without allowing the waiting itself to poison the heart. For the soul that learns to trust God in delay becomes anchored in something deeper than circumstance, something steadier than emotion, something strong enough to survive even the longest night without surrendering entirely to despair. Fear has a peculiar way of making itself sound reasonable. It rarely arrives shouting like an enemy announcing war. More often it speaks softly, patiently, almost intelligently. It studies human weakness and then begins whispering its quiet prophecies of disaster. Nothing will change. You are too late. The door will never open. Others may succeed, but not you. And because fear repeats itself constantly, many souls slowly begin mistaking its voice for truth. Yet breakthrough often begins at the size moment a person stops allowing fear to narrate their future. The tragedy is not merely that fear exists, the tragedy is how completely it shrinks human vision. A fearful soul interprets every obstacle as permanent. Every delay becomes proof of defeat. Every disappointment becomes evidence that hope itself was foolish. Fear narrows life until all possibilities seem buried beneath failure. It convinces people to remain spiritually motionless long before God has finished writing their story. C.S. Lewis understood that fear thrives most powerfully when the soul forgets eternity and becomes imprisoned entirely within immediate circumstances. Human beings stare so intensely at present difficulties that they lose awareness of the greater reality surrounding them. They see closed doors but not the God who still possesses keys. They see weakness but not the divine strength capable of sustaining fragile people. Fear feeds upon this limited perspective. It survives by keeping the eyes fixed only upon visible problems. There are many people who never step into new seasons, not because God refused to lead them there, but because fear persuaded them to remain where they were familiar. Saturday. Fetty becomes an idol. Predictability becomes more comforting than purpose. Some souls would rather remain trapped in known misery than risk the uncertainty required for transformation. Fear understands this deeply. It does not always need to destroy ambition completely, it merely needs to delay obedience long enough for discouragement to take root. What makes fear especially dangerous is that it often disguises itself as wisdom. A person tells themselves they are simply being realistic, practical, cautious. But there is a difference between wisdom and paralysis. Wisdom acknowledges difficulty while still moving forward faithfully. Fear studies difficulty until movement itself becomes impossible. One trusts God while remaining aware of danger. The other worships danger until trust disappears entirely. Breakthrough begins when the soul recognizes that fear cannot be allowed to hold final authority. This does not mean the absence of trembling. Courage is not the destruction of fear, but the decision that something greater will speak louder. Faith does not always feel emotionally powerful. Sometimes faith is simply taking one more step while uncertainty still lingers heavily in the mind. ND. Many people wait to feel completely confident before obeying God, yet complete certainty rarely arrives beforehand. Abraham walked without fully knowing where the road would lead. Moses doubted his own ability to speak. Countless souls throughout history moved forward carrying weakness, confusion, and trembling hearts. What separated them was not perfection, but willingness. Fear spoke to them also, yet they refused to build their lives entirely around its voice. There is also a strange exhaustion produced by living too long under fear's authority. The soul becomes divided against itself. Part of the heart longs for freedom, while another part remains terrified of disappointment. This inner conflict drains spiritual strength. A fearful life eventually becomes smaller and smaller because every possibility is examined primarily through the lens of danger rather than purpose. But when trust in God begins growing stronger than fear, something changes internally. The soul no longer requires guarantees before taking faithful steps. It understands that divine presence matters more than perfect clarity. Peace slowly returns because life is no longer controlled entirely by imagined disasters. Fear loses power when the heart realizes that even failure itself is not beyond God's ability to redeem. And perhaps this is why breakthrough often starts invisibly before circumstances change outwardly. It begins within the hidden chambers of the heart where fear once ruled uncontested. The soul finally grows tired of bowing before anxiety, tired of rehearsing worst-case scenarios, tired of treating hopelessness as wisdom. A quieter but stronger voice begins emerging beneath the noise of panic, the voice of faith, reminding the weary heart that God has not abandoned the story yet. That closed seasons are not eternal, that impossible situations do not intimidate heaven, and that the future may still contain doors waiting to open for those willing to trust God enough to keep walking forward.